My grandson arrived at midnight and begged me, "Grandma, please, hide this box and don't ask anything." I trusted him. But the next morning, the police knocked on my door. My heart stopped when they told me what they were looking for. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The knock came at midnight. Not the polite tap of a neighbor needing sugar, but the desperate hammering of someone running from something. I was 70 years old, and in all those decades living in my modest two-story house in Portland, Oregon, I'd never heard a sound quite like that. My arthritis protested as I pushed myself up from the reading chair where I'd dozed off, my mystery novel still open on my lap. The grandfather clock in the hallway told me it was 12:17 in the morning. "Grandma, please, open up," Ethan's voice. My 26-year-old grandson, the brilliant boy who could make computers sing and dance, who'd always been the quiet one at family gatherings while his cousins bragged about their achievements. I fumbled with the chain lock, my fingers clumsy with sleep and sudden fear. When I opened the door, I barely recognized him. His face was the color of old newspaper, drained of all vitality. Sweat plastered his dark hair to his forehead despite the cool October night. His hands trembled as they clutched a metal box, the kind you'd use for important documents or perhaps a collection of old photographs. His eyes darted past me into the house, then over his shoulder at the quiet suburban street behind him. "Ethan, what on earth?" "Grandma, hide this and don't ask anything." His voice cracked on the last word. He thrust the box into my arms. It was heavier than I expected, solid and cold. "Please, just for a few days. Don't open it. Don't tell anyone. Not Mom, not Dad, not anyone." I held the box against my chest, feeling its weight settle into my bones. "Are you in trouble?" "I can't explain. Not yet. But I need you to trust me." His eyes met mine, and I saw something there I'd never seen before. Not just fear, but a fierce determination that reminded me of myself 40 years ago when I'd fought to keep this very house after my husband died. "Can you do that? Can you trust me?" What could I say? This was the boy I'd taught to tie his shoes, who'd spent every summer vacation helping me tend the garden out back, who'd fixed my computer more times than I could count, and never made me feel stupid for asking the same questions over and over. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I can trust you." Relief washed over his face for just a moment. Then he was moving, backing away from my porch, his eyes scanning the street again. "I'll call you when it's safe. I love you, Grandma." And then he was gone, jogging toward an old sedan I didn't recognize parked 3 houses down, its headlights off. I watched until the car turned the corner. Then I stepped back inside and locked the door. Locked the deadbolt, too, for good measure. The box sat on my kitchen table under the yellow light of the fixture I'd installed with my late husband in 1989. Plain gray metal, about the size of a large shoebox, with a simple latch but no lock. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea with hands that wouldn't quite stay steady. The kitchen was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of that old clock in the hall. I didn't open the box. I'd promised. Instead, I carried it upstairs to my bedroom and slid it under the bed, behind the boxes of winter sweaters I hadn't gotten around to organizing. Then I lay awake until dawn, listening to every car that passed, every creak of the house settling, every gust of wind that rattled the window panes. When morning finally came, I felt every one of my 70 years in my aching joints and tired eyes. I made coffee, strong, black, and tried to convince myself that everything would be fine. Ethan was a good boy, a smart boy. Whatever was in that box, whatever trouble he was in, there had to be a reasonable explanation. The knock on my door at 9:30 in the morning shattered that comfortable lie. Through the peephole, I saw 2 police officers on my porch. A man and a woman, both in their 30s, both wearing expressions of professional courtesy that didn't quite reach their eyes. My heart began to hammer against my ribs so hard I thought they might hear it through the door. I took a breath, smoothed down my cardigan, arranged my face into the expression of a confused elderly woman, which wasn't far from the truth. Then I opened the door. "Mrs. Ashley Brennan?" the female officer asked. She had kind eyes, I noticed, or at least eyes that were trying to look kind. "Yes? Can I help you?" "I'm Officer Martinez. and this is Officer Pelosi. We're sorry to bother you so early, ma'am. We're looking for your grandson, Ethan Brennan. Have you seen him recently?" I let my mouth fall open slightly, let confusion crease my forehead. It wasn't entirely an act. "Ethan? No. Not for a few weeks at least. Is everything all right? Is he hurt?" The officers exchanged a glance, and something passed between them that made my stomach clench. Officer Pelosi, the male officer, spoke this time. "We need to speak with him regarding a serious matter. A very serious matter, Mrs. Brennan." "You're certain you haven't heard from him?" "What kind of serious matter?" I asked, letting a tremor enter my voice. "Officer, please, you're frightening me. What has my grandson done?" "We can't discuss the details of an ongoing investigation," Martinez said gently. "But if Ethan contacts you, it's very important that you call us immediately. Can you do that?" She handed me a card with her name and number printed in neat block letters. I took it with fingers that genuinely shook now, because this was real. The police were involved. Whatever Ethan had gotten himself into, it was serious enough to bring officers to my door before breakfast. "Of course," I managed. "But there must be some mistake. Ethan's a good boy. He works with computers at that bank downtown, the big one on Fifth Avenue. He wouldn't do anything wrong." Another glance between them. This one lasted longer. "First National Trust," Officer Pelosi said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, that's the one. He's been there for 3 years now. They promoted him last spring." I was babbling, I realized, but babbling seemed appropriate for a worried grandmother. "Is this about the bank? Did something happen there?" "Mrs. Brennan," Martinez said, and her voice had gone firmer. "If your grandson contacts you, you need to call us. This isn't something you want to get involved in. Do you understand?" The implied threat hung in the air between us like smoke. I nodded, clutching the card to my chest. "I understand. I'll call if I hear anything." They left, finally, but I watched them from the window as they sat in their patrol car for a long moment, talking to each other, looking at my house, looking at me through the lace curtains. Then they drove away, and I was alone with the box under my bed, and questions multiplying in my mind like rabbits. I managed to wait until 10 o'clock before I went upstairs and pulled the box out from under the bed. My promise to Ethan echoed in my ears. Don't open it. Don't ask anything. But the police had been at my door. They'd called this a serious matter, which could mean anything from theft to fraud to something far worse. I needed to know what I was hiding. I needed to know what kind of trouble my grandson was in. The latch opened with a soft click. Inside, nestled on a bed of folders and papers, were dozens of white envelopes. Not business envelopes, but the kind you'd use for greeting cards, each one with a name and address written in Ethan's precise handwriting. I picked one up, felt the thickness of cash inside. I opened it with trembling fingers. $500 bills, crisp and new, and a small card with a typed message. "What was taken from you has been returned. You deserved better." My legs went weak. I sat down hard on the edge of my bed, the envelope still in my hand, and stared at the box. There had to be 50 envelopes in there, maybe more. That meant thousands upon thousands of dollars. And underneath the envelopes were folders, bank documents, spreadsheets, what looked like internal memos with the First National Trust letterhead. With hands that could barely grip, I pulled out one of the folders and opened it. The spreadsheet inside was marked Client Account Adjustments, Q3 2024. I didn't understand all of it, numbers and codes and banking terms that meant nothing to me, but I understood enough. I understood the column labeled Removed Funds and the column labeled Reason, which was filled with phrases like Maintenance Fee Override and Administrative Processing Charge and Account Rebalancing. But it was the names in the first column that made my blood run cold with recognition and rage. Thelma Pacheco, Harold Kim, Rose Delacroix, Dorothy Washington. I knew these names. These were people from the senior center where I volunteered twice a week, playing cards and organizing the book club. Thelma had told me 2 months ago that she'd lost $5,000 from her retirement account due to unexpected fees. Harold had been devastated when the bank informed him his savings had been reduced by administrative charges he didn't authorize. Rose had cried at the center, saying she didn't understand what had happened to her money. My hands began to shake again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from understanding. I pulled out another folder, and another, scanning through page after page of what could only be described as systematic theft. The bank, Ethan's bank, First National Trust, had been skimming money from retirement accounts, from the savings of elderly people who trusted them with their life's work. Small amounts mostly, a few hundred here, 1,000 there. Amounts that might not be noticed immediately, or that could be explained away with confusing banking jargon and fine print. But there were hundreds of names, hundreds of victims, and my grandson had discovered it. At the bottom of the box, under all the folders and envelopes, I found a single piece of paper folded in half. When I opened it, I recognized Ethan's handwriting immediately, though it was messier than usual, written in what must have been desperate haste. Grandma, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I told you not to open it, but I know you well enough to know you probably would. I couldn't let it continue. The bank has been stealing from retirees for at least 2 years, maybe longer. I found the code in the system, the automated skimming program hidden in the account management software. I tried reporting it internally, but my supervisor told me to forget what I'd seen. He said it was managed risk allocation and that I didn't understand the financial instruments involved. But I did understand. I understood that people like you were having their savings stolen by rich executives who saw you as nothing but numbers on a screen. I used my access to trace every theft. Then I reversed them. The money in these envelopes came from one of the executive slush funds, money they'd hidden in offshore accounts. I took it back and I'm returning it to the people they stole from. I know it's illegal. I know I'll probably go to jail. But I couldn't live with myself if I did nothing. They're going to come after me. They're going to say I'm the thief. They'll say I embezzled from the bank, that I'm the criminal. But you'll know the truth. And maybe, if you can find a way, you can make sure the real thieves don't get away with it. I love you. I'm sorry for putting you in this position, but I trust you more than anyone in the world. Ethan. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, holding that letter, feeling the weight of what my grandson had done settle over me like a heavy blanket. He wasn't a criminal. He was a whistleblower, a vigilante perhaps, but one driven by a sense of justice that I recognized in my own soul. They wanted to frame him. The bank, First National Trust, wanted to make him look like a thief to cover up their own theft. And they had the resources to do it, to make it stick, to destroy a good young man's life to protect their corruption. The doorbell rang again, and my heart jumped into my throat. But this time, when I looked through the peephole, I saw my daughter Rebecca standing on the porch, her face pinched with worry and irritation. Ethan's mother. I quickly put the letter back in the box, closed the lid, and shoved it under the bed once more before hurrying downstairs. "Mom," Rebecca said the moment I opened the door, not even waiting for a greeting. "Have the police been here?" "What?" "Yes. How did you—" "They came to my house this morning looking for Ethan." She pushed past me into the hallway, her designer handbag swinging from her shoulder, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "They said he's wanted for questioning about some kind of theft from the bank. This is insane, Mom. Ethan wouldn't steal anything, but they seem to think he's taken money from his employer." I closed the door slowly, my mind racing. "What did you tell them?" "The truth, that I haven't seen him in a week. But they asked about you specifically. They asked if he might have come here." Her eyes narrowed. "He hasn't, has he?" The lie came easier than it should have. No, I told them the same thing. I haven't seen him." Rebecca studied my face for a long moment, and I forced myself to meet her gaze steadily, to keep my expression open and honest. Finally, she sighed and sank down onto the couch in my living room. "This is going to destroy him, even if he's innocent. And of course he's innocent. Just being accused of something like this will ruin his career, his reputation." "What exactly are they saying he did?" I asked, sitting down in the armchair across from her. They wouldn't give me details. "Just that there's evidence he accessed accounts he shouldn't have, that money is missing. They made it sound like he's been embezzling." She pressed her fingers to her temples. "Benny is furious. He thinks Ethan got greedy, that he saw an opportunity and took it. Benny." My son-in-law, a corporate attorney who'd always looked down his nose at Ethan's computer tinkering, as he called it, who'd made it clear he thought his only son should have gone into law or finance, something respectable. "Benny is wrong," I said quietly. "Ethan isn't greedy. He's never been greedy. Then where is he?" Rebecca's voice cracked. "If he's innocent, why is he hiding? Why hasn't he called us?" "Because he knew you wouldn't believe him," I thought, but didn't say. "Because he knew your husband would assume the worst. Because the only person he trusted was an old woman with arthritis and a stubborn streak." "I don't know," I said instead, "but I'm sure there's an explanation." Rebecca left 20 minutes later, still worried but slightly reassured by my calm demeanor. I watched her drive away in her BMW. Then I locked the door and stood in my quiet house, surrounded by 40 years of memories, and one metal box full of secrets that could destroy my family or save it. The police thought Ethan was a thief. His own parents had doubts, but I knew the truth. And somehow, I needed to figure out how to protect him without getting caught myself, how to expose the real criminals without the evidence that was currently hidden under my bed. As I stood there in my hallway, the grandfather clock chiming the hour, I realized something that made my blood run cold. If the police came back with a warrant, if they searched my house, they'd find the box. They'd find the money and the documents. And instead of proving Ethan's innocence, it would look like exactly what the bank wanted it to look like: evidence of theft, with his elderly grandmother as an accomplice. I had to move the box, had to hide it somewhere safer than under my bed. But where? And how could I do it without drawing attention? The clock finished its chiming, and in the silence that followed, I heard a car door slam outside. I went to the window and felt my stomach drop. A dark sedan had pulled up across the street. 2 men in suits sat inside, one of them raising a camera with a long lens to point at my house. They were watching me. The bank was watching me. And I had a box full of evidence that could put me and my grandson in prison for years. I stepped away from the window before the men in the sedan could see me staring. My hands were steady now, my mind clicking through possibilities with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Fear had a way of sharpening the senses, and I'd learned long ago that panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. The box had to be moved. Tonight. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I went back upstairs and pulled out the box one more time, spreading the contents across my bed in organized rows. 53 envelopes total, each containing between $300 and $800. I did the math in my head, somewhere around $30,000 in cash. The folders contained bank documents, spreadsheets, and what looked like email printouts dating back 18 months. I took photos of everything with my cell phone, the one Ethan had given me last Christmas and taught me how to use. My hands weren't quite steady enough for perfect pictures, but they were legible. Then I carefully returned everything to the box exactly as I'd found it. The surveillance across the street complicated things, but it also told me something important. They didn't have enough evidence to get a warrant yet. If they did, they'd already be inside my house tearing it apart. They were watching, waiting for Ethan to contact me, waiting for me to make a mistake. I wouldn't give them one. At 2 in the afternoon, I did what I did every Thursday. I drove my old Honda Civic to the senior center for the weekly book club. The dark sedan followed me at a distance, not even trying to be subtle about it. Good. Let them watch me do exactly what they'd expect a harmless old woman to do. The Portland Community Senior Center occupied an old brick building that had once been an elementary school. Inside, the familiar smell of coffee and old books welcomed me like an embrace. Margaret Jones was already there, setting up folding chairs in a circle, her silver hair pulled back in the neat bun she'd worn for the 30 years I'd known her. "Ashley," she called out. "I was worried you might not make it. Thelma said you looked tired at cards last week." Thelma Pacheco, one of the names in Ethan's files. "Just didn't sleep well," I said, helping her arrange the chairs. "Margaret, can I ask you something? Has anything strange happened with your bank accounts lately? Any unexplained fees or charges?" Her expression darkened immediately. "Actually, yes. Last month I lost $700 to what they called an administrative adjustment. When I called to complain, they buried me in paperwork and technical terms until I gave up." She paused, studying my face. Why do you ask? Just curious. I've heard a few people mention similar things. It's First National Trust, isn't it? This came from behind me. Harold Kim, shuffling in with his cane, his weathered face creased with anger. They've been robbing us blind. Dorothy Washington lost over $2,000. They told her it was due to account optimization protocols, whatever that means. 3 more names from Ethan's list. My grandson had been right about everything. That's terrible, I said carefully. Has anyone reported it? Harold snorted. To who? The bank? They're the ones doing it. The police? They'd laugh at us. We're old people complaining about fees we probably didn't read carefully in the fine print. There's gotta be something we can do, Margaret said. There is, I said quietly, but I need time to figure out what. They both looked at me with surprise and something that might have been hope. I'd always been the quiet one in the group, the one who listened more than she spoke. But something had shifted in me since last night. I'd been given a weapon against these thieves, and I intended to use it. The book club proceeded as usual, discussing the latest mystery novel we'd all been reading. But my mind was elsewhere, planning, calculating. When it ended at 4 o'clock, I drove home with the dark sedan still trailing behind me. The surveillance continued through dinner and into the evening. I made myself eat, though I had no appetite, and I forced myself to watch television in the living room where they could see me through the windows, a normal old woman having a normal Thursday night. At 10 o'clock, I turned off the lights and went upstairs to bed, taking the box with me. At midnight, when the sedan's occupants would be tired and less alert, I moved. I'd lived in this house for 40 years, and I knew every inch of it, including the loose board in the floor of my closet that led to a crawl space beneath the upstairs bathroom. It had been my husband's hiding spot for anniversary gifts and birthday surprises. Now it would hide something far more dangerous. I worked by the light of my cell phone, lifting the board quietly, wrapping the box in 2 plastic bags to protect it from moisture, and lowering it into the darkness. Then I replaced the board and arranged my shoes over it exactly as they'd been before. The evidence was safe, but what was I going to do with it? I lay awake until dawn again, listening to the sounds of the house, thinking about Ethan somewhere out there, alone and frightened, thinking about the families who'd been robbed, thinking about the men watching my house. Friday morning brought a new complication. My son-in-law Benny showed up at 8 o'clock, dressed in one of his expensive suits, his expression a mixture of concern and suspicion that set my teeth on edge. Ashley, he said when I opened the door. He never called me Mom, always by my first name, maintaining that professional distance he seemed to need. We need to talk about Ethan. I let him in, made coffee I didn't offer to share, and waited. Rebecca is beside herself, he said, standing in my kitchen rather than sitting, as if he didn't plan to stay long. The police called again this morning. They're saying the bank has evidence that Ethan stole over $50,000. $50,000. Close to what was in the envelopes, but not exact. They were inflating the numbers to make the crime seem worse. That's ridiculous, I said. Ethan would never... The bank has records, Ashley. Digital footprints. Ethan accessed accounts he had no authorization to touch. He transferred money out of the system. Benny's voice was cold, factual, the tone he probably used in court. The evidence is damning. Or it's been manufactured, I said quietly. His eyes sharpened. What do you mean? I'd said too much. Careful, Ashley. I mean that banks make mistakes. Maybe someone else used his access codes. The FBI is involved now, Benny said, and I felt the blood drain from my face. This isn't just local police anymore. This is federal bank fraud. If Ethan doesn't turn himself in, if he doesn't cooperate, he's looking at 10 to 20 years in prison. The FBI, that changed everything. They had resources the local police didn't. They could get warrants faster, dig deeper, connect dots I didn't even know existed. Has he contacted you? Benny asked, watching me carefully. No, because if he has, and you're helping him hide, you could be charged as an accomplice. Aiding and abetting. Obstruction of justice. They could seize this house, Ashley, your savings, everything. There it was, the threat wrapped in concern. Benny wasn't just here to warn me. He was here to scare me into cooperating. I understand, I said calmly. Thank you for letting me know. He studied me for a long moment, clearly frustrated that his intimidation tactics weren't working. Rebecca wants you to come stay with us for a few days. She's worried about you being alone while all this is happening. That's kind of her, but I'm fine here. Ashley, I said I'm fine. I kept my voice gentle but firm. I'm 70 years old, Benny. I've been taking care of myself for a long time. I'm not going to fall apart over police questions. He left 10 minutes later, unsatisfied, and I watched his Mercedes pull away from the curb. The dark sedan was still across the street, the same two men inside. They'd watched Benny's visit with interest, probably wondering what he'd told me, whether I'd break. I wouldn't. But I needed help. Real help. From someone who understood what I was up against and had the resources to fight back. The answer came to me as I was washing my coffee cup. Marcus Rivera. Marcus had been a friend of my late husband, a journalist who'd worked for the Oregonian for 30 years before retiring 5 years ago. He'd spent his career investigating corruption, exposing fraud, holding powerful people accountable. He'd won awards for his work on corporate malfeasance and government waste. If anyone could help me turn Ethan's evidence into something that would protect him rather than damn him, it was Marcus. I found his number in my ancient address book and called from my cell phone, not the landline that might be tapped. Ashley Brennan, Marcus said warmly when he answered. It's been too long. How are you? I need your help, Marcus. Something serious. But I can't talk about it over the phone. A pause. Are you in danger? Not immediately. But my grandson is. The bank case, he said. And I felt a chill. I've been following it. Your grandson is Ethan Brennan, the IT specialist they're accusing of embezzlement. He didn't do it. Or rather, he did. But not the way they're saying. Another pause. Longer this time. Can you meet me tomorrow? There's a coffee shop on Hawthorne, the Daily Grind. 2 o'clock? I'll be there. I hung up and immediately erased the call from my phone's history, paranoid now about digital footprints. Then I went upstairs and took more photos of the documents hidden in my closet, backing them up to a cloud storage account Ethan had set up for me months ago. The afternoon brought another visitor, this time Officer Martinez, alone, her expression more sympathetic than before. Mrs. Brennan, may I come in? I let her in, offered tea that she accepted, and waited to see what had changed. I wanted to talk to you off the record, she said once we were seated at my kitchen table. About your grandson. All right? I've been a police officer for 12 years. I've arrested a lot of criminals, and I've learned to read people pretty well. She wrapped her hands around her teacup. Ethan doesn't fit the profile of an embezzler. Everything about this case feels wrong to me. Hope sparked in my chest. What do you mean? The bank is pushing too hard. They want him arrested now, charged now, no investigation into whether their own systems might be compromised. They've brought in expensive lawyers. They're pressuring my superiors. They're controlling the narrative. She looked at me directly. Usually when someone is this eager to paint someone as guilty, it's because they're hiding something themselves. So what can you do? Nothing official. My hands are tied. But if Ethan were to turn himself in to me specifically, I could make sure he's treated fairly, that his side of the story gets heard before the lawyers bury him. It was tempting. So tempting. But it was also potentially a trap. I don't know where he is, I said honestly. But if he contacts me, I'll think about what you've said. She left me her personal cell phone number, and I believed she was sincere. But belief wasn't certainty, and I couldn't risk Ethan's freedom on a police officer's sympathy, no matter how genuine it seemed. That evening, as I was preparing dinner, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Grandma, I'm okay, don't worry. Delete this message. My hands shook as I typed back. Police everywhere. FBI involved. Be careful. The response came immediately. I know. Did you open the box? Yes. I understand everything. Helping. I'm sorry for dragging you into this. Don't be. I love you. Stay safe. The message thread disappeared a moment later, deleted remotely by Ethan's technical wizardry. But the comfort of knowing he was all right, that he was being careful, settled over me like a blanket. Saturday morning, I drove to meet Marcus Rivera, the dark sedan following at its usual distance. The daily grind was busy with the weekend crowd, full of students with laptops and couples enjoying brunch. Marcus was already there, sitting in a corner booth with a view of the door, his gray beard neatly trimmed, his eyes still sharp despite his 75 years. "Ashley," he said, standing to hug me. "You look worried." "I am worried." I sat across from him, ordered coffee from the waitress, and waited until she left before speaking. "What do you know about First National Trust?" "That they're one of the most powerful financial institutions in Oregon, that they have politicians in their pocket, that they've been accused of predatory lending practices before but always managed to settle out of court." He leaned forward. "Why?" "Because they've been stealing from retirees, and my grandson discovered it." I told him everything. Ethan's midnight visit, the box full of cash and documents, the police investigation, the FBI involvement, the surveillance outside my house. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each revelation. When I finished, he sat back and let out a low whistle. "Your grandson is either very brave or very foolish. Probably both. Can you help him?" "Maybe. But I'll need to see the evidence. All of it. I have photos on my phone." We spent the next hour going through the images, Marcus taking notes on a small pad, his journalist's instincts engaged. Twice he swore under his breath. Once he actually laughed, though there was no humor in it. "This is bigger than simple theft," he finally said. "This is systematic fraud at the institutional level. If I can verify these documents, if I can corroborate the claims with the victims, this could bring down the entire executive board of First National Trust." "But will it save Ethan?" Marcus met my eyes. "I don't know. The legal system doesn't always reward whistleblowers, especially ones who took the law into their own hands. But if we can make enough noise, create enough public pressure, they might be forced to offer him a deal." "What do you need from me?" "Time. Access to the original documents when it's safe. And names of the victims who are willing to go on record. We made plans to meet again in 3 days. Marcus would start making calls, reaching out to contacts in the financial regulation world, building a case. I would work on convincing the people from the senior center to trust me with their stories. I left the coffee shop feeling something close to hope for the first time since Thursday night. The dark sedan followed me home, and I let them. I had nothing to hide in my car. Nothing incriminating on my person. I was just an old woman meeting an old friend for coffee. But when I pulled into my driveway, I saw something that made my blood run cold. My front door was standing open. Someone had been inside my house. I sat in my car for a moment, my heart hammering, trying to think clearly through the fear. The men in the sedan across the street were watching me, waiting to see what I'd do. If I called the police, they'd search my house thoroughly. If I went inside alone, whoever had broken in might still be there. But the box was hidden. The evidence was safe in the crawl space. They couldn't have found it. Could they? I got out of my car slowly, made a show of checking my mailbox, my movements deliberate and calm even as adrenaline surged through my veins. Then I walked up to my front door and pushed it open wider. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling just enough to sound like a frightened old woman. "Is someone here?" Silence answered me. The lock had been forced. I could see the splintered wood around the frame where someone had pried it open. Inside, my living room was chaos. Couch cushions thrown on the floor, books pulled from shelves, drawers emptied and their contents scattered across the carpet. They'd torn through my home like a tornado, systematic and thorough. I made myself walk through each room, cataloging the destruction. The kitchen cabinets hung open, dishes and pans strewn across the counters. In my bedroom, the mattress had been pulled off the frame, my dresser drawers overturned, clothes everywhere. They'd even torn down the curtains, but they hadn't found the crawl space. The board in my closet was still in place, my shoes arranged over it exactly as I'd left them. Relief made my knees weak. I sat down on the edge of the bare bed frame and let myself shake for a moment, let the fear wash through me and then drain away, leaving behind something harder and colder. They'd violated my home. These people, whether it was the bank's men or someone else, had come into the house where I'd raised my daughter, where I'd celebrated Christmases and birthdays, where my husband had died in my arms. They'd torn through my memories looking for evidence to destroy my grandson, The anger that rose in me was almost cleansing in its intensity. I called the police from my landline, knowing the men outside were probably listening, wanting them to hear. Officer Martinez arrived within 20 minutes, along with 2 other officers I didn't recognize. She walked through the house with me, taking notes, photographs, asking questions. "Was anything taken?" she asked. "I don't think so. I don't keep much of value here. Some jewelry from my late husband, but it's still in my dresser." I'd already checked. They'd gone through the jewelry box but left everything. They hadn't been looking for things to steal. "This looks like they were searching for something specific," Martinez said, echoing my thoughts. "Do you have any idea what?" I met her eyes steadily. "No, I'm just an old woman. What could I possibly have that anyone would want?" She held my gaze for a long moment, and I saw understanding flicker there. She knew. She might not have proof, but she knew this was connected to Ethan, to the bank, to everything we hadn't said to each other during her visit yesterday. "I'll file a report," she said quietly. "Get your locks changed today. Install a security camera if you can. And Mrs. Brennan, be careful." After the police left, I called a locksmith who promised to come within the hour. Then I started cleaning up the mess, putting my life back in order piece by piece. It was therapeutic work, restoring order to chaos, and it gave me time to think. The break-in changed everything. It meant the bank knew I was involved, that they suspected I had something they needed. The surveillance outside my house hadn't been enough. They'd escalated to direct action, which meant they were getting desperate. Desperate people made mistakes. My phone rang as I was refolding clothes. Rebecca's number. "Mom, I just heard about the break-in. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a mess to clean up. Benny thinks you should come stay with us, at least until they catch whoever did this." "I'm not leaving my home," I said firmly. "This is where I belong." "But Mom..." "Rebecca." I softened my tone. "I appreciate your concern, but I've lived here for 40 years. I'm not going to be scared out of my own house by some burglar." She sighed. That particular sound of exasperation that meant she thought I was being stubborn and old-fashioned, but knew she couldn't change my mind. "At least let Benny hire a security service. Someone to watch the house at night. That won't be necessary." "Mom, please. For me?" I thought about it. Having security would actually make things harder. More eyes on me, more people to evade if I needed to move the evidence or meet with Marcus again. But refusing too adamantly would seem suspicious. "All right," I said finally. "But just for a few days, until things settle down." That seemed to satisfy her. We talked for a few more minutes about nothing important, and then she had to go. I went back to cleaning, my mind working through the implications of the break-in, the surveillance, Benny's sudden interest in protecting me. The locksmith arrived at 4 o'clock, a young man with kind eyes who installed new deadbolts on both my front and back doors and didn't charge me extra for the emergency call. By the time he left, my house was secure again, at least physically. Emotionally was another matter. That evening, I drove to the senior center again, even though there was no scheduled activity. Margaret Jones had given me her address weeks ago, insisting I visit sometime. Tonight seemed like the right time. The dark sedan followed me, of course. Let them watch me visit a friend. Let them think I was seeking comfort after my traumatic day. Margaret lived in a tidy bungalow with a garden that would have made my late husband weep with envy. She opened the door with surprise and pleasure, ushering me inside and immediately putting on tea. "Ashley, what a lovely surprise. Though you look exhausted. Was the break-in terrible?" So word had spread already. The senior center grapevine was faster than any social media. "It was violating," I admitted. "Margaret, I need to talk to you about something important. About your bank account, and Harold's, and Dorothy's, and Thelma's." Her expression shifted from concern to wariness. "What about them?" I told her everything. Not about Ethan directly, I couldn't risk exposing him. But about the bank's fraud, the systematic theft, the evidence I'd seen. I told her about the journalist who was willing to investigate if he had victims willing to go on record. "This is really happening?" she asked when I finished. "It's not just bad luck or mistakes. It's theft, Margaret. Organized, deliberate theft. They're counting on people like us being too confused or too intimidated to fight back. Her hands clenched around her teacup. Those bastards? I worked 40 years as a teacher. That money was supposed to see me through retirement. Will you help? Will you talk to Marcus Rivera and tell your story? Yes. No hesitation. And I'll get Harold and Dorothy to talk to him too. We're not going to let them get away with this. We spent the next hour making calls, reaching out to other members of the senior center, explaining the situation in careful terms. By the time I left Margaret's house, I had commitments from 8 people to meet with Marcus and share their stories. It was a start. The dark sedan followed me home, and I noticed something new. A second car had joined them, a gray SUV that parked 2 houses down from my house. The security Benny had hired? Or more watchers from the bank? I couldn't tell anymore. I was surrounded by eyes, hemmed in by surveillance, but I'd taken the first real steps toward fighting back. Sunday morning brought a visitor I hadn't expected. A lawyer. His card read, James Hutchinson, Senior Partner, Hutchinson & Wade. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my car, and had the kind of smooth confidence that came from never having heard the word no from anyone who mattered. Mrs. Brennan? I represent First National Trust. May I have a moment of your time? Every instinct screamed at me to slam the door in his face. Instead, I smiled politely. Of course. Would you like some coffee? We sat in my living room, him on the couch that still bore the signs of yesterday's violation. Me in my armchair, both of us pretending this was a friendly social call. I'll be direct, Hutchinson said, setting down his coffee cup untouched. The bank is willing to make you a very generous offer. $100,000 deposited into an account of your choosing in exchange for your cooperation in locating your grandson. $100,000. More money than I'd seen in my entire life. Enough to renovate this house, to take that trip to Europe I'd always dreamed about, to leave something substantial for Rebecca. All I had to do was betray Ethan. I don't know where my grandson is, I said calmly. Mrs. Brennan, please. Let's not play games. The bank is prepared to be very generous, but our patience isn't infinite. His smile didn't reach his eyes. You're a woman of limited means. You live on a fixed income. This house needs repairs you can't afford. $100,000 could change your life. And what happens to Ethan? He'll face justice, of course. But with his cooperation, the charges could be reduced. Community service, probation. The bank is primarily interested in recovering its property and ensuring this kind of security breach doesn't happen again. Lies. All lies. They wanted to destroy Ethan, to make an example of him, to ensure no other employee ever dared to expose their corruption. I see, I said. And if I can't help you find him? The mask slipped, just for a moment. Then I'm afraid the bank might have to consider whether you've been complicit in his actions. Whether you knowingly harbored stolen property, whether you obstructed a federal investigation. He leaned forward. You could lose everything, Mrs. Brennan. This house, your savings, your freedom. Is protecting your grandson worth spending your final years in prison? There it was, the threat beneath the bribe. Cooperate or be destroyed. I think you should leave, I said quietly. He stood, straightening his expensive suit. You have 48 hours to reconsider. After that, the bank will pursue all available legal options. He placed a business card on my coffee table. I hope you make the wise choice. I watched him leave, then picked up his card with fingers that wanted to tremble but wouldn't let themselves. 48 hours. 2 days to either betray my grandson or face criminal charges myself. I called Marcus Rivera the moment the lawyer's car disappeared around the corner. They just offered me $100,000 to give up Ethan, I told him. Jesus, they're panicking. That means we're getting close to something that scares them. Papers rustled in the background. I've been making calls. Ashley, this is bigger than we thought. First National Trust isn't just skimming from retirement accounts. They've been bundling the stolen money into offshore investment vehicles. We're talking millions, maybe tens of millions, over the past 5 years. My head spun. How is that even possible? Complex financial instruments, shell corporations, regulatory capture. The people who are supposed to be watching them have been bought off or intimidated into silence. His voice hardened. But your grandson's evidence could break it wide open. If we can get it to the right people. They gave me 48 hours before they filed charges against me. Silence on the other end. Then, we need to move faster. Can you get me the original documents tonight? I thought about the surveillance outside my house, the watchers who never seemed to sleep. It's too dangerous. Ashley, if they arrest you, they'll search your house with a warrant. They'll find the evidence anyway, and then it'll disappear into an evidence locker where it can be accidentally destroyed or lost. We need to get it out now, while we still can. He was right. I knew he was right. There's a 24-hour diner on Powell Boulevard, I said. Rosie's. I can be there at midnight. I'll be waiting. I spent the rest of Sunday preparing. I transferred all the photos from my phone to multiple cloud storage accounts, using different passwords for each, writing them down in a code only I would understand. I made copies of the copies, stored them on USB drives I hid in places no one would think to look. Inside a box of tampons in the bathroom cabinet, taped to the back of a picture frame, buried in a bag of flour in the pantry. If they arrested me, if they destroyed the originals, the truth would still exist somewhere. At 11:30 that night, I retrieved the box from the crawlspace. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might be having a heart attack, but I made myself move slowly, carefully, checking the street through my bedroom window before every step. The sedan was still there. The SUV, too. Both sets of watchers, faithful as dogs. But I'd lived in this house for 40 years, and I knew things they didn't. There was a door in my basement that led to a narrow passage between my house and my neighbor's, a relic of the original construction, meant for utility access. It opened onto a side street 1 block over from my house, hidden from view by overgrown bushes that I'd never bothered to trim. I'd used it exactly twice in 40 years. Once when I'd locked myself out, and once when Rebecca was a teenager sneaking out to meet boys. Tonight, I'd use it to save my grandson. I went down to the basement carrying the box, dressed in dark clothes, my phone in my pocket. The passage smelled of earth and mildew, and I had to crouch to fit through it, my knees screaming in protest. But I made it to the other side, emerging into the cool night air 1 street over from my house, completely invisible to the watchers. My Honda was being monitored. But my neighbor 3 houses down had mentioned last week that they'd be out of town visiting grandchildren. And they'd also mentioned, in that casual way neighbors do, that they kept a spare key under a flower pot by their back door in case of emergencies. I felt like a criminal as I borrowed their car, a modest Toyota that would blend into traffic. But desperate times called for desperate measures, and I'd return it before dawn with a full tank of gas and a note of apology. The drive to Rosie's diner took 20 minutes. I kept checking my rearview mirror, paranoid that somehow they'd tracked me, but the streets behind me stayed empty. Marcus was waiting in a back booth, a cup of coffee in front of him. His eyes widened when he saw the box. "You actually brought it. We don't have time to waste." I slid into the booth across from him and pushed the box over. Everything's in there. Documents, spreadsheets, the cash that needs to be returned. What are you going to do with it? First, I'm going to verify everything. Then I'm going to write the most thoroughly researched, legally bulletproof article of my career. And then I'm going to send copies to every major news outlet, every financial regulator, every senator and congressman who might care. He opened the box, his hands almost reverent as he touched the folders inside. "This is Pulitzer-level material, Ashley. This could change everything. And Ethan? I'll make sure the story makes it clear he's a whistleblower, not a criminal. Public opinion is a powerful thing. If we can make him a hero instead of a villain, they'll have a much harder time prosecuting him." It wasn't a guarantee, but it was the best hope we had. I left the diner at 1 in the morning, feeling simultaneously lighter and more terrified than I'd been in days. The evidence was out of my hands now, beyond my control. All I could do was wait, and hope that Marcus was as good as his reputation suggested. I returned the borrowed car, crept back through the passage to my basement, and climbed the stairs to my bedroom. The watchers outside hadn't moved. As far as they knew, I'd been asleep in my bed all night. A harmless old woman dreaming harmless old woman dreams. I lay in bed as dawn broke over Portland. and I wondered what the next 48 hours would bring. The answer came sooner than I expected. At 7 Monday morning, my doorbell rang. I looked out to see a woman I didn't recognize, middle-aged, professional, carrying a briefcase. When I opened the door, she smiled apologetically. "Mrs. Brennan, I'm Linda Sawyer from Adult Protective Services. Your son-in-law filed a report expressing concern about your capacity to care for yourself. I'm here to conduct a wellness evaluation." I stood frozen in my doorway, Benny's betrayal hitting me like a physical blow. He'd called Adult Protective Services. He was trying to have me declared incompetent, unable to care for myself, so he could take control of my decisions, my home, my life. "Mrs. Brennan?" Linda Sawyer's voice was gentle, concerned. "May I come in?" I forced myself to smile, to appear calm and collected even as rage burned in my chest. "Of course. Please, come in. Would you like some coffee?" "That would be lovely. Thank you." I led her to my kitchen, grateful I'd cleaned up most of the break-in damage. The house was tidy now, organized, nothing that would suggest I couldn't care for myself. I made coffee with steady hands, arranged cookies on a plate, and sat across from her at the kitchen table like this was a friendly visit rather than an evaluation that could strip away my autonomy. "I understand you had a break-in on Saturday," Linda said, pulling a notepad from her briefcase. That must have been frightening. It was unsettling, yes, but I handled it appropriately. I called the police, filed a report, had new locks installed. The house is secure now. "And you're living here alone?" "I've been living alone since my husband passed away 15 years ago. I manage quite well." She asked more questions about my health, my medications, my daily routine, my social connections. I answered each one calmly, demonstrating that I was sharp, capable, fully in command of my faculties. I showed her my pill organizer, neatly arranged with a week's worth of medications. I walked her through my home, pointing out the safety features I'd installed over the years. Grab bars in the bathroom, good lighting, clear pathways with no trip hazards. "You seem very independent," Linda observed. "Why do you think your son-in-law is concerned?" "I honestly don't know. Perhaps he's worried because of the break-in. Or perhaps—" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "My grandson is in some legal trouble. Nothing he actually did wrong, but the accusations have been stressful for the family. Benny may think I'm not handling the stress well. Are you handling it well?" "I'm handling it the way I've handled every crisis in 70 years of life, with patience, wisdom, and faith that the truth will come out eventually." Linda smiled, and I saw approval in her eyes. "Mrs. Brennan, between you and me, you're one of the most capable seniors I've evaluated. Your home is well maintained, you're clearly managing your health and finances, and you have strong social connections. I see no reason for intervention at this time." Relief washed through me, but I kept my expression neutral. "Thank you. Will you be reporting that to Benny?" "I'll be filing my report with the agency, and they'll communicate with whoever filed the complaint. But yes, I'll make it clear that I found no cause for concern." After she left, I sat alone in my kitchen and let myself shake. Benny had tried to have me declared incompetent. He'd tried to take away my independence, my agency, my ability to protect Ethan. This wasn't just family concern anymore. This was warfare, and I was starting to understand why. Benny worked for a major corporate law firm. His firm represented financial institutions. What were the odds that First National Trust was one of their clients? What were the odds that Benny's sudden interest in controlling me had nothing to do with concern and everything to do with protecting the bank? My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Mom, I'm sorry about the APS visit. Benny did it without telling me. I'm so angry with him right now." I believed her. Rebecca had her flaws, but she wasn't cruel. Benny had acted alone, and now he'd created a rift in his own marriage. I texted back. "It's all right, sweetheart. The evaluation went fine. I understand he's worried, but I didn't understand. Or rather, I understood too well." That afternoon, Officer Martinez called my cell phone. "Mrs. Brennan, I wanted to give you a heads up. The FBI is planning to execute a search warrant on your home tomorrow morning. Someone convinced a judge that you might be hiding evidence related to your grandson's case." My heart stopped. "Tomorrow? 8 a.m. I'm sorry. I fought against it, but the pressure from above is intense." She paused. "If there's anything you need to do before then..." now would be the time. She was telling me to get rid of evidence, to destroy anything that might implicate me or Ethan, but I'd already done that. The box was with Marcus, the documents being verified and prepared for publication. My house was clean. There's nothing to find, I said honestly. But thank you for the warning. Mrs. Brennan, be careful who you trust. This case has powerful people very nervous, and nervous, powerful people are dangerous. After she hung up, I sat on my couch and tried to think through the implications. The FBI would tear my house apart tomorrow. They'd find the crawl space eventually. They had equipment for that, thermal imaging or whatever they used, but they wouldn't find anything except dust and old insulation. The real question was, who had convinced a judge to issue the warrant? And what did they hope to find? My phone rang again. This time it was Marcus. Ashley, we have a problem. Someone broke into my apartment last night. They took my laptop and my backup drives. Ice flooded my veins. The box? Safe. I'd already moved it to a secure location, but they got the digital copies of the documents I'd been working on. His voice was grim. They're trying to shut this down before I can publish. Can you still write the story? Yes, but I'll need more time. I have to recreate my analysis from the original documents. And Ashley, whoever did this knew exactly what they were looking for. They didn't take anything else, just the materials related to First National Trust. They're watching you too. Probably. Which means we need to be even more careful about how we communicate. He paused. There's something else. I got a call this morning from my editor at the Oregonian. He said if I publish anything about First National Trust, the paper will face legal action. They're threatening to sue for libel before the story even runs. Can they do that? They can try. The legal system can be weaponized by people with enough money. They can bury us in litigation for years, bankrupt the newspaper, destroy my reputation. But I heard steel in his voice. But I'm not backing down. I've dealt with threats before. This story is too important. What can I do? Keep your head down. The FBI search tomorrow is meant to intimidate you, to make you panic and do something stupid. Don't give them the satisfaction. Act like the innocent grandmother you're pretending to be. After we hung up, I spent the rest of the day preparing for tomorrow's invasion. I cleaned obsessively, making sure there was nothing even remotely questionable in my home. I organized my papers, my bills, my tax returns, everything in perfect order, showing a life of boring, predictable responsibility. At 6 that evening, Rebecca showed up without calling first. She looked terrible, eyes red from crying, makeup smeared, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Mom, I need to talk to you. Can I come in? Of course, sweetheart. I held the door open and she practically fell into my arms, sobbing. I held her while she cried, stroking her hair like I had when she was small and had skinned her knee. Finally, she pulled back and wiped her eyes. Benny and I had a huge fight. About you, about Ethan, about everything. He's been lying to me, Mom. About so much. We sat on the couch, and Rebecca poured out the whole story. Benny's firm did represent First National Trust. Had for over a decade. When Ethan's case broke, Benny had been assigned to help coordinate the bank's legal strategy. He'd been the one pushing for aggressive prosecution, the one advocating for investigating everyone connected to Ethan, the one who'd suggested that I might be complicit. He used me, Rebecca said bitterly. He asked me questions about you, about what you might know, where you might hide things. I thought he was just worried about our family, but he was gathering intelligence for the bank. Does he know about the box? I asked carefully. I don't know. I never told him Ethan came to see you, but he might have guessed. She grabbed my hands. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have seen what he was doing. I should have protected you. You're protecting me now, I said gently. And that's what matters. There's more. She took a shaky breath. Benny has access to all the bank's internal communications about this case. He knows they're panicking because there's evidence out there that could destroy them. He knows they've hired private investigators to watch you, to search for anything they can use. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Mom, they're planning to arrest you tomorrow when the FBI searches your house. They're going to plant something, make it look like you've been hiding evidence all along. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. Plant evidence. Frame me just like they were framing Ethan. How do you know this? I found emails on Benny's computer. He left it open this morning after our fight, and I looked. I know it was wrong, but I had to know what he was involved in. Tears streamed down her face again. He's not the man I married. Or maybe he is, and I just never wanted to see it. Rebecca, I cupped her face in my hands. Listen to me. You need to leave him. Tonight. Pack a bag and get out of that house before he realizes you know. I can't just... Yes, you can. If he's willing to frame his own mother-in-law, what do you think he'll do to you if he knows you've betrayed his secrets? I kept my voice firm, but gentle. You can stay here tonight. Tomorrow, after the FBI search, we'll figure out the next steps together. She nodded slowly, then hugged me again. I love you, Mom. I'm sorry I didn't believe in you sooner. Sorry I let Benny poison me against Ethan. I know, sweetheart. I know. After Rebecca left to pack some things, I sat alone in my house and tried to process everything I'd learned. They were going to plant evidence. They were going to arrest me. And Benny, my son-in-law, the father of my grandchildren, was part of the conspiracy. I called Marcus again. They're going to frame me tomorrow, I told him. Plant evidence during the FBI search. He swore viciously. Can you prove it? My daughter found emails, but they're on her husband's computer. She can't exactly walk into court with stolen evidence. No, but she can testify to what she saw. Ashley, this changes everything. If we can prove the bank is engaging in evidence tampering, witness intimidation, conspiracy, this becomes criminal, not just civil fraud. What do I do tomorrow? Exactly what I said before. Act innocent. But also, record everything. Use your phone to document the entire search. If they try to plant something, we need proof. Won't they make me put my phone away? They might, but there are other options. Do you have a security camera? Not yet. Get one tonight. The kind that streams to the cloud. Install it somewhere they won't immediately notice. Maybe in that bookshelf in your living room, aimed at the front door. If they plant evidence, we'll have video proof. After he hung up, I drove to the nearest electronics store and bought a small wireless camera, the kind advertised for home security. The young clerk helped me set it up, showing me how to position it in my bookshelf and connect it to my phone. By the time I finished, it was streaming live footage to a cloud account, recording everything that happened in my living room. Rebecca returned at 10 with 2 suitcases and eyes that were dry but still red-rimmed. Benny knows I left. He called my phone 50 times. I turned it off. Good. Let him stew. I showed her to the guest room, made sure she had everything she needed. Tomorrow will be difficult, but we'll get through it together. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed listening to the sounds of my daughter breathing in the room down the hall, thinking about Ethan somewhere out there in hiding, thinking about the FBI agents who would come in the morning with their warrant and their hidden agenda. At 7 a.m., I was already awake, dressed and drinking coffee when I heard vehicles pulling up outside. Through my window, I saw not just FBI sedans but also marked police cars, a news van, and at least a dozen people converging on my quiet street. They were making a show of this. They wanted my neighbors to see, wanted the community to know that Ashley Brennan was a criminal, a co-conspirator, someone who'd helped her grandson steal from innocent people. The lies were already being written before they even knocked on my door. At exactly 8 o'clock, the pounding started. I opened the door to find a grim-faced FBI agent holding up a warrant. Mrs. Ashley Brennan, we have a warrant to search these premises. Please step aside. I stepped back, and they flooded in. 8 agents, maybe more, spreading through my house like ants. Rebecca came down the stairs, her face pale, and stood beside me as we watched them begin their systematic destruction of my home. "Ma'am, we need you to hand over your cell phone," one agent said. I gave it to him without argument. But the camera in my bookshelf continued recording, its tiny lens hidden behind a row of mystery novels, capturing everything. They searched for 3 hours. They went through every drawer, every closet, every cabinet. They pulled up floorboards in the basement. They searched the crawl space in my closet and found nothing but dust. I watched one particular agent, a woman in her 30s with cold eyes, work her way through my kitchen. She opened the flour canister where I'd hidden a USB drive with backup documents. She found it, examined it, and slipped it into an evidence bag. That was legitimate evidence, something I'd actually hidden. But then I watched her reach into her own pocket and pull out something else, a small Ziploc bag containing what looked like documents. She glanced around to make sure no one was watching, then slid it behind my refrigerator, wedging it into the small gap between the appliance and the wall. My hidden camera captured everything. 10 minutes later, another agent discovered the planted evidence. He called his supervisor over with great excitement, and they made a show of photographing it in place before carefully retrieving it. "Mrs. Brennan," the supervisor said, walking into my living room where Rebecca and I sat on the couch, "we found documents that appear to be internal bank records in your kitchen, documents that were reported stolen. Can you explain how they came to be in your possession?" "I have no idea what you're talking about," I said honestly. "I've never seen those documents before." "Ma'am, I'm afraid I'm going to have to place you under arrest." Rebecca gasped and grabbed my hand, but I squeezed back, calm, because I had proof now. The camera had recorded everything. They'd shown their hand, revealed their corruption, and they didn't even know it. "I understand," I said quietly. "May I call my lawyer?" "After you've been processed." They handcuffed me, actually put handcuffs on a 70-year-old woman, and led me out to one of their sedans. My neighbors were watching from their porches and windows, their faces shocked and judgmental. The news camera captured everything. The reporter speaking into her microphone about the grandmother arrested for helping her grandson steal from innocent victims. As they drove me away, I caught a glimpse of the dark sedan that had been watching my house. The men inside were smiling. They thought they'd won. The FBI field office in Portland was a cold, institutional building that smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee. They processed me like any other criminal. Fingerprints, photographs, personal belongings cataloged and sealed in a plastic bag. The handcuffs had left red marks on my wrists, and my arthritis was screaming from having my arms pulled behind my back for so long. But I kept my face calm, my voice steady, my dignity intact. They put me in an interrogation room, gray walls, metal table, 2 chairs, and a mirror that I knew was one-way glass. I sat there for over an hour before anyone came to speak with me. A classic intimidation tactic that might have worked on someone younger or less experienced with hardship. I'd buried a husband, raised a daughter as a single mother, fought off bill collectors and insurance companies and every other bureaucratic nightmare life could throw at me. I could handle sitting in an uncomfortable chair. When the door finally opened, I was almost relieved. The man who entered was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and the kind of face that had learned to hide all emotion. He carried a thick file folder and a cup of coffee that he didn't offer to share. "Mrs. Brennan, I'm Special Agent Thomas Garrett. I'd like to ask you some questions about the documents we found in your home. I'd like to speak with my lawyer." "Of course, that's your right. But I thought you might want to hear what we know first." He opened the folder, spreading photographs across the table. "These are internal bank documents detailing account access codes and security protocols. Very sensitive information. The kind of information someone would need if they were planning to commit fraud." I looked at the photos without touching them. "I've never seen those documents before today. They were found in your home." "So you say, but I didn't put them there." Agent Garrett leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Mrs. Brennan, you seem like a reasonable woman. A good woman who's been put in a difficult position by her grandson. We understand that. We understand family loyalty. But Ethan has committed serious crimes, and helping him makes you complicit." "I haven't helped him commit any crimes." "Then why did he come to your house at midnight 3 days ago?" My heart skipped, but I kept my expression neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about. We have surveillance footage from a neighbor's security camera. A car matching the description of a vehicle Ethan was seen driving earlier that day. Someone matching your description opening your door at 12:17 a.m. He slid another photo across the table, grainy, but clearly me standing in my doorway. "What did he bring you, Mrs. Brennan?" "They had surveillance from a neighbor's camera. They'd been building their case before they ever came to my door, collecting evidence, watching and waiting." "I'm 70 years old," I said calmly. I don't always remember late-night visitors. Perhaps someone had the wrong house. Your grandson stole over $50,000 from First National Trust. He accessed accounts he had no authorization to touch. He transferred money, falsified records, and then went on the run. And you expect us to believe you know nothing about any of this? I expect you to prove your accusations with actual evidence, not assumptions. I met his gaze steadily. And I'd like to speak with my lawyer now. I won't answer any more questions without legal representation. Garrett's jaw tightened. He gathered up his photos and left without another word. I was alone again for another hour, my back aching, my throat dry, but my resolve firm. When the door opened again, I expected another agent. Instead, I saw Officer Martinez, her face troubled. Mrs. Brennan, I pulled some strings to get 5 minutes with you. You have a visitor who's been raising hell outside, demanding to see you. Rebecca? Marcus Rivera. He's threatening to call every news outlet in Oregon if they don't let him verify you're being treated properly. She paused. He's also filed an official complaint about the search of your home, claiming evidence tampering. Hope flared in my chest. Can I see him? Not officially, but I can let you make a phone call. She handed me her personal cell phone. You have 3 minutes. I dialed Marcus's number with trembling fingers. Ashley, thank God. Are you all right? His voice was tight with worry. I'm fine. Did you get the video? Rebecca sent it to me through a secure connection. Ashley, we have them. Clear footage of that FBI agent planting evidence. This is huge. This is federal corruption, conspiracy, evidence tampering. I've already shared it with 3 different attorneys who specialize in civil rights violations. What about your story? Marcus said. But after my arrest, the newspaper decided to publish it immediately. First National Trust's fraud is about to become national news. He paused. But Ashley, they're going to fight back hard. They're going to try to discredit you, destroy your reputation, make you look like a senile old woman who doesn't know what she's talking about. Let them try. I know the truth. There's something else. Ethan contacted me through an encrypted channel. He's willing to turn himself in, but only if he can do it publicly, with press present, and only after my story runs. He wants to tell his side before they can silence him. Tears stung my eyes. Is he safe? For now. He's been moving around, staying off the grid, but he can't run forever. Marcus's voice softened. He's a brave kid, Ashley. You raised him right. I didn't raise him. Rebecca did. But he has your integrity, your courage. That came from somewhere. Officer Martinez tapped her watch. Time was up. Thank you, Marcus, for everything. Thank me when this is over and you're home where you belong. I handed the phone back to Martinez, and she led me to a holding cell, a small room with a bench and a toilet and bars on the window. My cellmates were 2 younger women, one asleep on the bench, the other staring at the wall with hollow eyes. First time? The one who was awake asked me. Yes. What did they get you for? Something I didn't do. She laughed bitterly. Yeah, that's what we all say. But I wasn't like the others in here. I had evidence, I had allies, and I had the truth on my side. I just had to survive long enough for it to matter. That night, sleeping on a hard bench in a county holding cell, I dreamed of Ethan as a little boy, helping me plant tomatoes in the garden, his hands dirty and his smile bright. In the dream, he looked at me and said, "Don't worry, Grandma. The good guys always win in the end." I woke up hoping he was right. Tuesday morning, they brought me before a judge for arraignment. I was assigned a public defender, a young woman named Sarah Davis who looked fresh out of law school but had sharp, intelligent eyes. "Mrs. Brennan, I've reviewed your case," she said during our brief consultation before the hearing. "The evidence against you is circumstantial at best, and I've been contacted by several attorneys who want to represent you pro bono, which is unusual for a case like this." "Marcus Rivera sent them," I said. "He did. And one of them is Elena Pratt. She's famous for taking on corruption cases. She wants to meet with you after the arraignment." Sarah smiled slightly. "You have good friends, Mrs. Brennan." In the courtroom, I stood before Judge Nellie Thornton, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and a no-nonsense expression. The prosecutor, Not the FBI, but someone from the district attorney's office, argued for high bail, claiming I was a flight risk and had been helping my grandson evade justice. Sarah stood and countered with a passionate defense, pointing out my age, my roots in the community, my clean record, my cooperation with authorities. She mentioned the complaint filed about evidence tampering and suggested that perhaps I was being targeted unfairly. Judge Thornton looked at me over her reading glasses. "Mrs. Brennan, do you understand the charges against you?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And how do you plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor. Bail is set at $50,000. You're to surrender your passport if you have one, and you're not to leave the state of Oregon." She banged her gavel. Next case. Rebecca was waiting outside the courtroom, her face pale but determined. "I already called a bail bondsman. You'll be out within the hour." True to her word, by noon I was walking out of the courthouse into bright October sunshine, blinking against the light. A small crowd had gathered, reporters with cameras and microphones, curious onlookers, and right in front, Marcus Rivera with a woman I didn't recognize. "Ashley, this is Elena Pratt," Marcus said. "Your new attorney." Elena was in her 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a sleek bun and the kind of presence that commanded attention. She shook my hand firmly. "Mrs. Brennan, I don't take cases unless I believe in my client's innocence. Marcus showed me the video from your home. What they did to you is unconscionable, and I intend to make them pay for it. I can't afford—" "You're not paying. I'm taking this case because it's the right thing to do, and because I hate seeing powerful institutions abuse elderly citizens." She guided me toward a waiting car, shielding me from the reporters. "We have a lot to discuss, but first, let's get you home." Home. The word had never sounded so beautiful. But when we pulled up to my house, I saw that it wasn't the sanctuary I'd left. Yellow police tape still stretched across the doorway. The door hung crooked on its hinges where they'd forced it open during the search. Through the windows, I could see the continued chaos. My possessions still strewn everywhere, my life torn apart and left in ruins. Rebecca got out of the car with me, her hand finding mine. "We'll fix it, Mom. We'll put everything back together." Elena's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and smiled grimly. "Marcus's story just went live. It's already trending on social media." She showed me her phone. The headline read, "Portland Bank accused of systematic fraud against seniors. Whistleblower grandson became target of retaliation." Marcus had done it. He'd told the truth, with all the documentation to back it up, with testimonials from victims, with analysis from financial experts. He'd exposed First National Trust's corruption in excruciating detail, and he'd made it clear that Ethan was a hero, not a criminal. Within an hour, my phone, returned to me when I was released, started buzzing with texts and calls. Friends from the senior center, former neighbors, people I hadn't heard from in years, all expressing support, all saying they'd known I couldn't be a criminal. Then a call came from a number I didn't recognize. "Grandma?" Ethan's voice. I hadn't heard it since that midnight visit, and tears immediately sprang to my eyes. "Ethan." "Oh, sweetheart, are you safe?" "I'm okay. I saw the news. I saw what you did. How you protected the evidence. How you stood up to them even when they arrested you." His voice cracked. "I'm so sorry I put you through this." "Don't be sorry. I'm proud of you. What you did took incredible courage. I'm turning myself in tomorrow." Marcus arranged for me to surrender to the FBI with my own lawyer present, with press there to witness it. "They can't make me disappear now, not with the whole world watching. Are you sure that's what you want to do? I have to face this. But Grandma, I need you to do something for me. I need you to be there when I turn myself in. I need the world to see that you believe in me. Of course I'll be there. I'll always be there for you." That evening, Elena came to my house with a team of people, a security expert who installed new locks and cameras, a cleaning service that helped Rebecca and me restore order to the chaos, and another attorney from her firm who specialized in suing government agencies for misconduct. "We're going after everyone," Elena told me as we sat in my living room, finally clean and organized again. "The FBI agents who planted evidence, their supervisors who approved it, First National Trust for conspiracy and witness tampering, and your son-in-law for ethics violations. Benny? Rebecca looked up from where she was reorganizing my bookshelf. What ethics violations? He had a conflict of interest representing the bank while his mother-in-law was a target of their investigation. He should have recused himself. Instead, he actively participated in the conspiracy against you. Elena's expression was fierce. We have the emails you found on his computer. Rebecca, you'll need to testify about those. And we have testimony from the Adult Protective Services investigator about his attempt to have Ashley declared incompetent. Rebecca nodded slowly. I'll testify. I'll do whatever it takes. That night, after everyone had left and it was just Rebecca and me in my quiet house, we sat together on the couch drinking chamomile tea. I'm filing for divorce, Rebecca said quietly. I already contacted a lawyer. Not Elena, someone who specializes in family law. I can't be married to someone who tried to destroy my mother and frame my son. I'm sorry, I said, taking her hand. Don't be. You were right all along. About Benny, about Ethan, about everything. She leaned her head on my shoulder like she had as a little girl. How did you always know? I didn't always know. I just chose to trust in the people I love and to believe that the truth would come out eventually. I squeezed her hand. That's what wisdom really is. Not having all the answers, but having faith that the answers will come. Wednesday morning dawned clear and cold. Elena picked me up at 9 o'clock, and we drove to the FBI field office where Ethan had arranged to surrender. A crowd had already gathered. Reporters, cameras, supporters holding signs that read, Ethan Brennan is a hero, and prosecute bank fraud, not whistleblowers. Marcus was there, along with half the members from the senior center, all wearing matching t-shirts that said Seniors Against Banking Fraud. And then I saw him, Ethan, walking up the steps of the federal building with his own attorney, his head held high despite the handcuffs he'd agreed to wear as part of the surrender. He was thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under his eyes, but his expression was determined. When he saw me, he smiled. I pushed through the crowd, Elena clearing a path for me, until I reached my grandson. The reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but all I cared about was pulling Ethan into a hug. I'm so proud of you, I whispered into his ear. I learned from the best, he whispered back. Then his attorney led him inside, and I watched him go, knowing that the fight was far from over, but that we'd already won the most important battle. We'd told the truth, and the truth had set us free. 3 months later, I stood in my kitchen making coffee on a cold January morning, watching snow fall softly over my garden. The house was quiet, peaceful, filled with the kind of calm that only comes after a storm has finally passed. The newspapers were spread across my kitchen table, not because I needed to read them anymore, but because I'd taken to saving the articles that documented everything that had happened. Today's headline read, First National Trust executives indicted on federal fraud charges. Whistleblowers' charges vindicated. It had taken 3 months, but the truth had finally caught up with the lies. Marcus's initial story had been the spark that ignited everything. Within days, other newspapers picked it up, and then national television news. Financial regulators who'd been looking the other way suddenly found their courage. Politicians who'd taken campaign contributions from First National Trust suddenly remembered they were supposed to protect constituents, not banks. The investigation expanded rapidly. What Ethan had uncovered was just the tip of the iceberg. Federal prosecutors discovered that the fraud extended beyond retirement accounts. The bank had been manipulating investments, hiding losses, funneling money into executive bonuses while ordinary customers paid the price. Over 5,000 victims across 3 states. Over $15 million stolen. The CEO resigned in disgrace. The CFO was arrested trying to flee to the Cayman Islands. The board of directors was dissolved. And First National Trust, once one of Oregon's most powerful financial institutions, was placed into receivership while the government sorted through the wreckage. As for the people who'd tried to destroy us, they faced their own reckoning. Special Agent Garrett and the agent who'd planted evidence in my home were both suspended, pending an internal investigation. When the video footage from my hidden camera was made public, Marcus had published it online where it was viewed millions of times. The FBI had no choice but to act. Criminal charges were filed. Both agents were now facing prison time themselves. James Hutchinson, the lawyer who'd tried to bribe me, was disbarred for ethics violations. His firm lost dozens of clients when their connection to the conspiracy became public knowledge. And Benny. Rebecca's soon-to-be ex-husband had tried to deny everything at first. But when confronted with the emails Rebecca had found, with testimony from multiple witnesses, with evidence of his role in coordinating the bank's legal strategy against his own family, he'd crumbled. His law firm fired him to avoid further scandal. The Oregon State Bar opened an investigation. Last I heard, he was working as a contract attorney for a small firm in Seattle. His reputation destroyed, his marriage over, his relationship with his children strained beyond repair. I didn't take pleasure in his downfall, but I didn't mourn it either. He'd made his choices, and choices had consequences. My own charges had been dropped within a week of Ethan's surrender. Elena Pratt had filed a motion to dismiss, presenting the video evidence of planted documents, and the prosecutor, realizing his case was built on fabricated evidence, had agreed immediately. He'd even apologized personally, though his apology rang hollow, given how eager he'd been to prosecute me before the truth came out. Elena was now representing me in a civil lawsuit against the FBI for false arrest, evidence tampering, and violation of my civil rights. She assured me we'd win a substantial settlement, though I'd told her any money should go to organizations that helped elderly victims of financial fraud. I didn't need money. I needed justice, and I'd gotten that. Ethan's case had been more complicated. Yes, he'd accessed accounts without authorization. Yes, he'd transferred money. But he'd stolen from thieves to return money to victims, a modern-day Robin Hood. Public opinion was overwhelmingly on his side, especially after Marcus's story revealed the full scope of the bank's fraud. The prosecutor offered him a deal: plead guilty to unauthorized computer access, a misdemeanor, with a sentence of probation and community service. No jail time. In exchange, Ethan would testify against the bank executives and provide technical expertise to help recover the stolen funds. He'd taken the deal. 2 weeks ago, he'd been sentenced to 3 years probation and 500 hours of community service teaching computer literacy to seniors. The judge who sentenced him had called him a young man of exceptional character who made a questionable choice for admirable reasons. Ethan was living with me now, at least temporarily, while he figured out his next steps. His old apartment had been ransacked during the bank's investigation, and he needed time to rebuild his life. I loved having him here. The house felt alive again with his presence, with the sound of his typing late into the night as he helped federal investigators untangle the bank's fraudulent accounting systems. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I opened it to find Margaret Jones and Harold Kim standing on my porch, both bundled against the cold, both smiling. "We brought breakfast," Margaret announced, holding up a bag from the local bakery. "Fresh cinnamon rolls. We thought you might want company." This had become a routine over the past few months. Friends from the senior center stopping by regularly, sometimes with food, sometimes just to sit and talk, all of us bound together by what we'd survived. We'd formed a support group, victims of the bank's fraud helping each other navigate the restitution process, sharing stories, finding strength in community. We sat around my kitchen table eating cinnamon rolls and drinking coffee while Harold told us about the check he'd received last week. Full restitution of everything he'd lost, plus interest. The federal government had seized First National Trust's assets and was systematically returning money to victims. $783.42, Harold said, his eyes bright. Exactly what they stole from me. I never thought I'd see that money again. "I got mine too," Margaret added. $700. It's not about the amount. It's about knowing someone finally listened. Someone finally believed us. That was the real victory, I thought. Not the money, not even the criminal convictions. It was the restoration of dignity to people who'd been dismissed and disrespected, who'd been told their concerns didn't matter, who'd been treated as if their life savings were trivial. After Margaret and Harold left, I spent the afternoon working in my garden despite the cold. I'd always found peace in growing things, in the patient work of tending plants and watching them flourish. My hands were dirty and my back ached, but it was good pain, the kind that came from productive work rather than stress. Ethan came out to help me, wrapping a scarf around his neck against the winter wind. "You know you could hire a landscaper," he said, kneeling beside me to help pull weeds. "Where's the joy in that? I like getting my hands dirty." We worked in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of silence that only exists between people who understand each other completely. "I got a job offer today," Ethan said finally. "A cybersecurity firm in Seattle. They specialize in helping companies identify fraud and security vulnerabilities. That sounds perfect for you." "It is, but it means moving away from Portland, away from you." He paused, his hands stilling in the dirt. "I don't know if I'm ready for that yet." I sat back on my heels and looked at him. This young man who'd risked everything to do the right thing, who'd trusted me with his darkest secret, who'd shown more courage at 26 than most people showed in their entire lives. "Ethan, I'm 70 years old. I've lived a full life, survived more than you can imagine. I don't need you to take care of me." I reached over and brushed dirt from his cheek. "What I need is for you to live your life, to take opportunities when they come, to build a future you're proud of. But after everything we went through, we both deserve to move forward, not stay trapped in the past." I smiled at him. "Seattle is only 3 hours away. You can visit on weekends, and I can finally use that laptop you gave me for video calls." He laughed, and the sound was so genuine, so free of the weight he'd been carrying, that it made my heart swell. "You're going to guilt me into teaching you how to use video chat, aren't you?" "Absolutely. That's what grandmothers do." That evening, Rebecca came over for dinner. Another routine we'd established, having family meals twice a week. She looked different now than she had 3 months ago. Lighter somehow, as if divorcing Benny had lifted a burden she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. The divorce would be final next month. She was already planning her next chapter, going back to school to finish the degree she'd abandoned when she got married, talking about maybe traveling, maybe finally pursuing the career in social work she'd dreamed about as a young woman. "I got a call from Benny today," she said as we sat around my dining room table. Me, Rebecca, and Ethan, 3 generations bound by love and tested by fire. He wanted to apologize. To all of us. "What did you say?" Ethan asked. I told him I wasn't ready to hear it yet. Maybe someday, but not now. She looked at her son. "He asked about you. He said he was proud of you for standing up for what was right, even though he couldn't." Ethan's expression was complex. Anger, sadness, and something that might have been pity all mixed together. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive him for what he tried to do to Grandma." "You don't have to forgive him," I said quietly. "Forgiveness isn't mandatory. But don't let anger poison your life either. What your father did, he has to live with. That's punishment enough." We talked late into the evening, sharing stories and making plans. Rebecca was going to help me organize the Senior Center's new financial literacy program. Classes teaching elderly people how to spot fraud, how to protect their assets, how to stand up for themselves. Ethan had volunteered to teach the computer security portion. Good was coming from the bad. Light was emerging from darkness. After they left, I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by 40 years of memories. Photos on the walls showing my life, my wedding day, Rebecca as a baby, Christmases and birthdays, my husband's funeral, Ethan's college graduation. Each picture a moment of joy or sorrow, triumph or struggle, all of them adding up to a life well lived. I thought about the woman I'd been 3 months ago, before the midnight knock, before the box, before everything changed. That woman had been comfortable, maybe a little complacent, content to live her quiet life without making waves. But crisis had revealed something I'd forgotten about myself. I was stronger than I looked, more capable than people assumed, more dangerous than anyone expected. They'd seen an elderly woman and thought I'd be easy to intimidate, easy to break, easy to silence. They'd been wrong. Age wasn't weakness. It was accumulated wisdom, hard-won experience, survival skills honed over decades of facing down life's challenges. I'd raised a daughter alone after my husband died. I'd fought off bill collectors and insurance companies and every other predator that came after vulnerable widows. I'd survived loss and grief and disappointment. Some bank executives and corrupt FBI agents didn't scare me. The phone rang. Marcus, calling to tell me his follow-up story had been nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. The story about the grandmother who'd taken down a corrupt bank, told with all the drama and detail that had made it national news. "They want to interview you for the Pulitzer Committee," Marcus said. "Would you be willing?" "Only if you promise not to make me sound like some kind of superhero. I'm just a woman who did what needed to be done." "Ashley, you are a superhero. You just don't wear a cape." After we hung up, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching snow continue to fall over my garden. In the spring, I'd plant tomatoes again. Maybe Ethan would help before he moved to Seattle. Maybe I'd finally try growing those roses I'd always wanted. The future stretched before me, full of possibilities I hadn't imagined 3 months ago. I'd survived the worst thing I could imagine, and I'd come out the other side not just intact, but stronger. My phone buzzed with a text from Officer Martinez, who'd become something of a friend after everything that had happened. "Saw the news about the Pulitzer nomination. Congratulations. You deserve all the recognition." I texted back, "Recognition is nice, but justice is better." Her response came immediately. "You got both." "That's rare." She was right. We'd gotten justice. Real, meaningful justice. The criminals had been punished. The victims had been compensated. The truth had prevailed. But more than that, I'd gotten something I hadn't expected. I'd rediscovered myself. The strong, capable, fierce woman I'd been before age and routine had softened her edges. She'd always been there, just waiting for the right moment to emerge. That night, I slept deeply and dreamlessly in my own bed, in my own house, surrounded by my own things. No surveillance outside, no threats hanging over my head, no secrets weighing down my soul. Just peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you've fought the good fight and won. 3 days later, I attended the formal ceremony where Ethan received a commendation from the state attorney general for his role in exposing the fraud. The auditorium was packed with victims, reporters, and officials, all there to witness justice being served. When Ethan's name was called, the entire audience rose in a standing ovation. I watched my grandson walk across that stage, watched him shake hands with the attorney general, watched him accept the certificate with humility and grace. And I thought about that midnight knock 3 months ago, about the terrified young man who'd thrust a metal box into my arms and begged me to trust him. I'd trusted him, and that trust had changed everything. After the ceremony, as we stood outside in the winter sunshine, Ethan turned to me. "Grandma, I've been thinking about something. The community service I have to do, teaching computer literacy to seniors. Would you be my first student?" I laughed. "I'm 70 years old, Ethan. I'm not sure these old fingers can learn new tricks." "That's what everyone thinks. But you proved that age is just a number. You took on the FBI and won. Learning to use a computer should be easy compared to that." He was right, of course. I'd spent too long thinking of myself as old, limited, past my prime. But the last 3 months had shown me that I was none of those things. I was Ashley Brennan. I was 70 years old. I was a grandmother, a friend, a fighter, a survivor. And my story wasn't over yet. It was just beginning a new chapter. "All right," I said, linking my arm through his. "Teach me about computers. But I warn you, I'm going to be a difficult student." "Grandma," he said with a grin, "after everything we've been through, I think I can handle it." We walked toward my car, toward home, toward the future, surrounded by people who believed in us and a world that had finally learned to listen. Sometimes justice came slowly. Sometimes it came through unexpected channels. But when it came through the trembling hands of a grandmother who refused to give up, who refused to be silenced, who refused to let the powerful crush the powerless, that was when it mattered most. That was when it changed the world. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.